Has the curse of the international break struck us again? Bukayo Saka limped off while playing for England last night, seemingly holding his hamstring. We'll tell you everything that we know about the 23-year-old's fitness. Well, the focus, of course, has been on England's poor display and whether or not Lee Carsley is capable of handling such a high-pressure role. But we're going to tell you the real story from last night. How a heartbroken, emotionally charged Greek team, who according to reports wanted this fixture postponed, turned up at Wembley, put in an excellent display, earning a historic win dedicated to their friend, teammate and brother, George Baldock. You are listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, how are you? Hope you're all having a wonderful Friday so far. Plenty to discuss on today's pod, which isn't something you can say that often in an international break, but we've got quite a bit to get into. As I say, we're going to talk Bukayo Saka, what's the latest on his fitness. I also want to talk about the Greece story. Now, look, I know that we're in England. I've been brought up in England, right? I completely get it. I understand why England is the story here. Obviously, from an Arsenal perspective, the main story is Bukayo Saka, and don't worry, we're going to do plenty on that too. But I just wanted to kind of put this message out there at the beginning because I know that there will be some people that listen to this pod. The majority of our listenership comes from the UK that might take what I'm going to say on today's pod as me gloating or trying to be disrespectful to England in sort of, I'm not going to say dancing around the England issues because I will talk about those as well. But I think people might listen to this pod and think that I'm being a bit biased and all the rest of it. But the truth is, guys, I just think that the story around Greece's victory last night needs to be told. And that's the great thing about having your own podcast. You can choose what you discuss. You can choose the narrative. There isn't someone telling me what I can and can't say and what I can and can't do. And you might think that I'm being sort of over the top around Greece's victory if you're an England fan and you're already sort of frustrated and disappointed by what you witnessed last night. But I promise you this isn't that. This isn't gloating. This is me wanting to tell a story that I think in the mainstream media here in England has been completely overlooked, has been completely played down, maybe not deliberately, because I think the default position to go to when England don't win is crisis, who's to blame, let's point the finger at him, let's point the finger at him. That's what happens, right? And that happens with all the big nations. You should read some of the back pages in Italy after the Azzurri lose a game. You should read some of the back pages in Spain after they lose a game. It happens to the bigger footballing nations. But the story around Greece's victory last night, it has to be told. It has to be told properly, and I'm definitely going to do that on today's podcast. Before we get into that, though, we're going to talk some of Arsenal's other players that were involved in international duty last night. We'll touch on how they got on. We're going to bring you the latest on Bukayo Saka's fitness. Fingers crossed it's nothing serious. We'll talk a little bit about England's issues, whether or not Lee Carsley is the guy. That's been a big debate on social media and on sort of the radio I've been listening to sort of last night when driving home from Wembley. And, of course, this morning as well. We'll get into all of that stuff. And then we're going to talk Greece's story because I think it's a really, really special one. And it's one that created a feeling of pride after a feeling of tragedy just 24 hours before that. So we'll do all of that on this show. I want to say a few hellos as well because there's loads of you in the live chat. In fact, let me just drag the live chat over to this side of the screen so that I can see it nice and clearly without having to look and hurting my neck. Look, let's say hello to Junior. We've got Matt joining us from Chicago. We've got Morsiga. We've got PW. Hacker is with us as well. Hacker says, if you ever wondered what being a non-Arsenal fan is like as a gooner, it's listening to a Greece fan, Harry, last night as an England fan. Big hello to Junior Gunner, who says, H, you said Greece didn't have a chance. Some of the slick passing and football being played was better than England's. It absolutely was. And you're right, I didn't think they had a chance. It's why I was in two minds as to whether or not I should have even gone. I'm so glad I did now, because it was a historic night for Greek football, and I'll be able to say, later down the line and to my grandkids, if they care one day, if I have grandkids, that I was there when Greece rocked up under those circumstances at Wembley and beat England. So yeah, of course, it was an amazing night, and I'm delighted to have got to sort of experience it firsthand. But let's get into the Arsenal players, because that's what you're really here to listen to. Not Greece chat, Arsenal chat. Let's do a bit of an international roundup with regards to how some of our players got on. William Saliba played 90 minutes for France in their 4-1 win over Israel. Leandro Trossard got a goal and an assist in a 2-2 draw between Belgium and Riccardo Calafiori's Italy. Gabriel started for Brazil in a 2-1 win over Chile, played the full 90 minutes, and Gabriel Martinelli came off of the bench. But of course, the big news is around the England players. Declan Rice has come in for a lot of stick again. I think he's in this weird spot as an England player right now where people are looking at him and thinking, hold on a minute, this is not the same Declan Rice that plays for Arsenal. And I would say, well, it's probably to do with the players around him. It's probably to do with the coaching. And I would also say that there are much bigger issues within that England team and the balance of it and the camp than there are with Declan Rice. When a player turns up and is brilliant for his club week in, week out, yet looks a shadow of himself on the international stage, you have to start off, I think, by asking why. Why is that the case? Why does somebody look so good in one environment and so ineffective in another? What's the difference between the two environments is where you should begin when it comes to that kind of assessment, analysis, that discussion. Declan Rice, though, came through the game, as far as we know, unscathed. Bukayo Saka, however, did not. He came off early in the first half, and we haven't really got a clear update on how serious this could be. I'm hoping it was just a bit of tightness. I'm hoping that he felt a bit of tightness and decided that it wasn't worth taking a gamble or taking a risk on. It was kind of a bittersweet moment for me, because no sooner had I sort of stopped celebrating Pavlidis' opener for Greece. Down one end of the pitch, I sort of turned to my right and saw Bukayo Saka sitting on the floor, looking absolutely flabbergasted, as if to say, I got a problem here, lads. He walked off the pitch, which is obviously a good sign, and he was seen sort of walking through the mix zone at the end of the match, not looking in too bad a shape, but obviously, if you pull your hamstring, it doesn't mean that you can't walk at all. It's painful, it's awkward, etc., etc., and it's normally an injury that probably takes, I don't know, maybe 4 weeks to get over if you do all the right things. It is one of the more common injuries in football. It is one that can happen in a number of ways. I'm really, really hopeful, given the robust nature of Bukayo Saka and how he's managed to come through so many situations with regards to fitness over the years when we thought he had no chance. I'm confident in saying that I think he'll be okay. What needs to happen now, though, is he needs to get back to London Colney. And we need to start working on it. He needs to begin all the required physiotherapy to try and relieve that. But everybody's been really, really tight-lipped and coy on what exactly the severity of this injury is. Perhaps they don't know yet. With an injury like that, you need to scan it really to understand whether there's been anything significant. There are some reports going around on X this morning at the time of recording, around about 11 a.m. on Friday, that it's not serious. It is a slight strain or a tightness that Arsenal will be able to deal with over the coming weeks ahead of that Liverpool game. I don't think it's the end of the world if he doesn't play at Bournemouth. I'd like him to, obviously. But obviously the Liverpool game is the one that you look at and you think, man, we really, really need you available for that. But those reports are unconfirmed. I don't know that they are 100% accurate. I'm not seeking to discredit anybody, but I just don't know. So I couldn't sit here and tell you anything different. But yeah, look, I think given his robust nature, given that he obviously didn't want to take any risk, maybe it was just a kind of tight feeling, and Bukayo Saka was like, nah, I'm not having this. I'm going to put myself down on the ground. And I'm not going to take any risks. And I'm going to come off and we'll see how it goes. there was some suggesting that because we're obviously Dark Arts FC now, that Bukayo Saka faked a hamstring injury so that he could get off because it was basically so shit that he didn't fancy continuing in the game. I really felt sorry for him last night on a kind of wider point because Lee Carsley, who everybody was telling me is the second coming as a coach after Gareth Southgate was almost heckled out of the job, has come in and, yes, I think England play a lot more openly and they certainly play with the handbrake off in comparison to what you saw from Gareth Southgate's side, but it also leaves them incredibly vulnerable. And then you've got people like Anthony Gordon trying to keep the width on one side, and you've got Bukayo Saka trying to keep the width on the other side. And given the position and the role that Trent Alexander-Arnold was playing, it felt like Saka was playing at right back at times. That's a complete and utter waste of Bukayo Saka's skill set. You get Bukayo Saka going at the Greek fullback over and over and over and over again, he's going to get loads of joy. He really is, because he's in a league above. It was just a bit strange to me that, yes, you want to play front-footed football and you want to use your fullbacks as midfielders and you want to play with false nines and all the rest of it. All the complexities of what Lee Carsley tried to do, I get them, I understand them. But at the same time, it feels to me like he missed a massive opportunity to just go at a side that aren't as bad as people make them out to be. Because I looked through the team last night before kickoff and you had a Benfica striker and you had Bundesliga players in there and you had somebody who plays in the Championship at Cardiff City in the midfield. And I'm not saying that that's a massively prestigious place to be, but the point I'm trying to make is that a lot of these guys are Europa League level players. They're not mugs. I heard someone on TalkSport last night when I was driving home ring up and say, Greece are mugs, we should have beat this lot, blah, blah, blah. And it angered me. And do you know why it angered me? Because there's a complete and utter disrespect from a lot of England fans towards every other nation. This is a country, guys, that haven't won a major tournament since 1966. Greece fans turned up at Wembley yesterday with banners saying, European champions, you'll never sing that. So sometimes people need to be reminded of what England's actual standing is in world football and not what they believe it is in their heads, because they look at a team sheet that's stacked full of talent. What has that talent actually gone out and produced? And so when I hear disrespect towards other nations, whoever it may be, whether it's Finland, Slovakia, whoever it may be, it winds me up. It gets under my skin. But anyway, Bukayo Saka, hopefully, fingers crossed, it is just a bit of tightness and he can get over that in good time. I'm confident he will. I'm hoping that we don't get news to the contrary. But I'm confident that we will be okay with that one. Guys, don't forget, if you haven't done so already, leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you're brand new as well. When you're watching us on YouTube, if you're listening on audio, please do leave us a review, guys. It really, really does help, especially on Apple at the minute, where we've lost a load of reviews due to a kind of transfer that we made from one platform to another, which is really, really frustrating because the reviews are gold dust on Apple Podcasts. So if you could leave one, even if you've left one before, if it lets you do it, please do it, because it's really, really important. And the more written reviews we get, even if it's one sentence, two sentences, the better. Also, remember, you can check us out on patreon.com as well. Visit www.patreon.com/The Chronicles of Aguna. The link is in the description below. Our latest In Focus episode was a piece on Gabriel Jesus and how, if at all, we can get him back to the level that he showed us when he first arrived at the football club. We took stock of where he's at, how he needs to get back to essentially where he needs to be. And I'm interested to get your thoughts on my thoughts in that episode. So do check it out. And your support would be hugely appreciated. Okay, let's talk a little bit about England then on the whole, because as I said in the intro, in the opener, all the focus in the sort of mainstream media has been on England, and I completely understand that. We're in England. They're a big story. I get that. I just find it also overreactionary. Carsley was a genius a matter of weeks ago because, and I quote, he'd taken the shackles off. He tried something different to what Gareth Southgate had been doing, and lots of people were obviously very against Gareth Southgate's methods and style, even though it took England further than they'd been in the last 5 decades. Lee Carsley tried something different, but I still saw a lot of similarities to what I saw at the Euros, which was a lack of ideas in the attacking third, a lack of know-how with regards to how to break a team down that sit with a low block. I thought they struggled with breaking the lines again, and I think that's where a lot of the Declan Rice criticism comes in, because a lot of people would make the case and would argue that he's not that great at sort of getting on the ball and working it through the lines early. And I think Arsenal recognise that as well. We talked about it many, many times last season. We've talked about it at the start of this season. We've talked about why Partey plays. We've talked about why Jorginho plays at times, because those guys might not be as physically good as Declan Rice, but they certainly have that capability in possession to do all the things that are required to start a build-up nice and early. Look, as I say, there was still a lack of ideas in the final third and still an issue with progressing the ball through the lines. Maybe it wasn't Gareth Southgate at all. Who knows? But yeah, you can't say that. People come at me. But look, where, for me, Lee Carsley really dropped the ball was not with the team selection, because the amount of people I heard ringing up the radio last night on my drive home and saying, oh, well, Lee Carsley got the team completely wrong. Guess what? You're all a bunch of hypocrites, because those same people were the people that were going during the Euros and in previous tournaments. We've got all these talented players. We've got to find a way of putting them all in. We've got to find a way of playing Foden and Saka and Palmer and Grealish and whoever else, and Bellingham and Kane and all of that. The same people that were desperate for that and said, why don't we just take the shackles off and go and play in the way that we know we can with these players? It's all down to Gareth Southgate. It's a mistake. We're then calling up last night and saying the team had no balance. Newsflash, it was never going to have any balance with all of those players in the same side. It was always going to be vulnerable. And England look more vulnerable under Lee Carsley than they ever looked at any point under Gareth Southgate. When I turned up, I expected to see Lee Carsley's side have all of the ball, have Greece camped back on the edge of their box, and it just be an attack versus defence drill. I almost expected to see what we kind of did at Manchester City in that second half. And you turn up there and you just hope from a Greece perspective that they can survive. And instead, they were very comfortable defensively, with the exception of a handful of moments, but also was super threatening on the counter-attack. They had the ball in the back of the net, 4 or 5 times was it? Completely dominated in the sense of, not always having the ball, but being in control at all times. When I talked about us sort of having teams where they're kind of like running at us and you've got your hand out and they're swinging punches at you, but they're not landing anything. Equally, you know that you pack a punch and you know that you've got a threat. And Greece, I thought, with Solis and Pavlidis in particular, I thought were really, really threatening on the break. And that wasn't because this Greece team is amazing or a brilliant side. It's because England left themselves vulnerable, because guess what? Lee Carsley did what all these people were calling for. And actually, it doesn't work. So maybe Gareth Southgate did know what he was doing. But I go back to the point I was making. Where Lee Carsley really dropped the ball for me was not what happened on the pitch. It was actually what happened afterwards in the press conference. He said, we practiced that formation for 25 minutes in training. Now, even if that's true, Lee, you don't need to put that out in the public domain. Guess why? Because people will hang on that one comment, just like I'm doing now, and will pull you apart for it, and will tear you apart for showing a sort of naivety that England fans were hoping wasn't really there. And then the other thing he said was that he's hoping to go back to the under-21s. Now, I think the context around that is probably a little bit different to the way that it came out. But again, you got to be really media savvy if you're going to be the England boss, a position that comes under such huge scrutiny. You have to be more careful with your words, because you are setting yourself up, Lee, for an absolute hammering in the press, hammering in the media. And judging by the radio I listened to this morning and what I've read on social media and all the rest of it, that is exactly what he is getting. So Gareth Southgate, I think, always understood that there needed to be a balance between offence and defence, because he knew that putting all of those players in was going to upset the balance. And yes, maybe England would score more goals over the long term with those players all on the pitch at the same time. But what's also abundantly clear, guys, is that they would concede a hell of a lot more too. And that can't happen in tournament football. England are not the only national team that turn up in tournaments and are pragmatic. International football, in its very nature, is more pragmatic than club football, because it's easier to set up a defense than it is to create elaborate attacking patterns with a group of players that you only have for a very short period of time. And that's the reality of international management. You get them in for a few days before you play, they take on board what you've coached them, you assess the game, and then they go away and you don't see them at times for another few months. It's very difficult to create those attacking passages of play, the elaborate things that we see in club football at international level. You just don't see it. And I always felt that people struggled to understand that with Gareth Southgate. Anyway, but look, De La Fuente, the Spanish coach, he lost very early on in his tenure as Spain boss. They stuck with him. He came up through the system and he did really, really well. I think it's too early to judge Lee Carsley, but I don't think his comments yesterday helped him. Okay, you know what? Let me pop into the live chat and then I want to talk a little bit about Greece. You'll have to indulge me today. Grant Newman, I like this. He says, learn from defeats and celebrate victories. Yeah, it's a great way of putting it. Alan Shen says he's got insomnia and he's watching his first live stream. Is that from San Francisco in the USA? Welcome, my friend. Great to see you. What else have we got? Cass says it was the lineup last night. It was all out attack from England. There was no balance to the side whatsoever. And everyone who played last night was crap. But it's down to the management. What else have we got? Trevor says 100%. Harry, thank you. What have we got here? England was so lucky to scrape through versus Slovakia at 90 seconds from losing the game, says PW. Completely agree, because I was at that game. I saw it with my own eyes. I thought England stunk the place out that day. But obviously, when you've got loads of talented players, when you've got loads of individual brilliance like they do have, that's undeniable. You've always got that moment in you. And Jude Bellingham has those moments in him. I mean, yesterday, I was sitting there watching the game and I was talking to my mate next to me. And even at 1-0 to Greece, when England were looked down and out, dead and buried, I turned around to him and I said, this isn't over yet. And the reason it's not over is because England only need a moment. And Jude Bellingham produced that moment and it was 1-1. And all of a sudden, all the life gets sucked out of Greece. They just had a potential second goal. Obviously, it was offside. I'm not contesting the decision. But they've had that goal taken away after the high of celebrating it. And then all of a sudden, the attitude changes. It goes, it's just, the momentum can shift. The momentum can shift, can't it? And we saw that yesterday. Let me take some more of your comments and questions before I get onto the Greece bit. Canterbury Guna says, Harry, do you think modern football journalism is becoming more and more tribalistic? Yeah, I do. I do. I think that's just the way it's gone, because I think people buy into their clubs now, not that they didn't in the past, but because there is so much content around for each club and all the rest of it, I think you can get really drawn into a club world without always getting the opinions and the perspectives of others. Like, say, for example, you're an Arsenal fan, right? There is probably 10 brilliant Arsenal podcasts that you can listen to on a weekly basis. If you listen to every single one of them, some of them are multiple times a week as well, right? So if you're talking, let's say on average twice a week, you're talking 20 hours, if they're an hour long, of Arsenal podcast time. When do you have time to listen to anything else? So you then end up becoming in this world where you only see things through one lens, and I'm like that for sure. And I think a lot of Arsenal fans are like that. And I'm not even criticizing it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think the mainstream media have figured out that the more tribal content, the more narrow covering content. So rather than content that covers all clubs, content that covers, specifics is going to do better. And so as a result, you see that, I think, reflected in the way the media behaves and operates as well. Some people saying that Saka's out for 4 weeks. I don't know where you got that from. I haven't read that. I will have a quick scroll, though, through X while we're live, just to make sure I haven't missed any major updates on that. I'm hoping it's not that bad, for God's sake. Please, please, please. My understanding, well, I say my understanding. It's not my understanding. It's not something I'm saying from knowledge. It's something I'm saying from partly hope, but partly, just based on the history with Bukayo Saka and all the things that he's managed to kind of come through. in recent seasons when we thought he was down and out physically, and he's managed to pick himself up and come through it. It's been brilliant. But anyway, look, guys, I'll get to some more questions a little bit later on. Lots of you making comments to the effect of, Lee Carsley not being media trained and all that. And I completely agree with that. Some people just are natural in front of the camera and in those environments. And obviously he's not. There was one comment I think I should probably address before we move on. Jay Muller says, Harry, you're way off the mark. Southgate was a reactionary manager and poor decision maker. Gareth Southgate took England further than they'd been in the last 50 years. And until somebody comes in and does better, then I'm going to say that Gareth Southgate did a good job for England. And I think the criticism that often gets thrown his way is massively unfair. There's a complete, and I'm not saying you specifically, but generally I think there's a complete disregard for the differences between club football and international football. And you turn up and you watch something else for 38 weeks in the Premier League and you think that that's going to be replicated on the international stage. Doesn't work like that. These guys aren't together day in, day out, week in, week out. It's a completely different environment. It's almost a different sport. And the disregard for that is one of the things I find most frustrating when it comes to the coverage of international football. But anyway, we've had the Southgate debate over and over and over again over the years on this podcast, so we'll leave it there for now. I got to tell you the story that I believe, as I said right at the top of the pod, needs to be told. Because for me yesterday, listen, the performance was good from Greece, okay? As much as people want to bash England and say that England were terrible, and they were, Greece were excellent. That's as good as I've seen Greece play, in my personal opinion, since Euro 2004. They had a lovely balance between being really organised defensively, everybody tracking their men, everybody making sure to shut down the right spaces, forcing England into the right areas. All of that was on display, but they also were very, very good at working the ball into their front line nice and early and exposing the spaces that England were leaving in behind. They had the ball in the back of the net, 4 or 5 times? The VAR was right to intervene, obviously, and the decisions were correct. I'm not disputing that for a second. But don't take anything away from that Greece performance. Not just because they were good on the night, but because of the circumstances under which they had to play that game. They were playing for so much more than 3 points in the Nations League. That was a spirited display from an organised but aggressive offensively team too. They were emotionally charged because of what they had learned in the 24 hours prior. They learned that their teammate, their friend, their brother had passed away under tragic circumstances at the age of 31. And according to reports, they wanted this game postponed. And they'd have been well within their rights to get that game postponed, in my opinion, given the circumstances. George Baldock was a part of that group, was a friend to all of these players. And they turned up and channeled all of that in the perfect way. They went out there, as I say, they defended well. They attacked well. They had balance to their game. They resisted the temptation of throwing the kitchen sink at England at points where England looked all over the place in the game. They managed it very carefully. There was focus from everybody, from the substitutes that came on, from those that played a bit part. Everybody was singing from the same hymn sheet. Everybody was plugged in to the mission, which was to go out there, first and foremost, and do George Baldock proud. Greece did that. And after the game, when you see sort of some of the content that's emerging, the team talk that was given in the changing room by the captain before the players went out on the pitch, that's all that was on their minds. That's all that was on their minds. And one of the reasons that you will see a lot of Greek people, Greeks living in other parts of the world and all the rest of it, feeling so proud of what they witnessed last night, is because whenever these people are up against it and have their backs up against the wall, they find a way to use that emotion in the right way. There's a unity, there's a togetherness that I'm sorry you don't see when you watch England. The fans in the stadium last night, that little corner of Greek fans, outsung the entire Wembley Stadium and were behind their team from the very beginning at every difficult moment. And obviously they were well entitled to enjoy the glorious moments as well in that game. But this is a story that needs to be spoken about more. As I said, they were playing for far more than 3 points in the Nations League. They were emotionally charged. It was difficult. The weight of the news that they'd received over the past 24 hours would have been weighing heavy on their shoulders, but they came out and they channeled it in the right way. And that's why everybody of a Greek persuasion is so proud of what they saw last night. Not only was it the first ever win over England, not only was it on Wembley turf and on the hallowed turf and in a stadium that a lot of these players could have grown up only dreaming of playing on, but they did it under those circumstances. And that's why this is a story that deserves to be spoken about. Yes, England were rubbish. Yes, Lee Carsley has a lot to answer for. Yes, from an England perspective, the night was a disaster. But in all of that, don't let the story of what Greece achieved last night under horrible circumstances be overshadowed. Don't allow that to happen, because that is the story from last night. Not how many attackers Lee Carsley picked, not what he said in the press conference. The story of last night's game is Greece and what they turned up and achieved at Wembley, given the moment that they were going through. That's what you should be focusing on. Obviously, from an Arsenal perspective, we're going to talk about, Bukayo Saka, and I completely understand that. And as I said to you guys, it was a bittersweet moment for me, because while I was super proud of what was going on at that end of the pitch, when I turned to my right and I saw Saka down, I thought, uh-oh. And I made a conscious effort, by the way, yesterday, not to overthink the Saka thing. And obviously I've woken up today and it's first and foremost on my mind, because I'm an Arsenal fan first and foremost. And, I'm desperate for him to be available after the international break. But I just think, I saw it yesterday and I didn't want it to distract me from what was going on. Because someone having a hamstring strain or bit of hamstring tightness, which we hope it is a nothing story in comparison to the story of a group of players who turned up 24 hours after their teammate was found dead in his swimming pool at 31 years old and put in the display of their lives. That's the story here. That's the story. But anyway, I've gone on for too long. Guys, if you wouldn't mind leaving a like on the video, if you're watching us on YouTube, it really, really does help. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new as well. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, then please do leave us a review and all the rest of it. You know the drill by now. Thank you so, so much. I know it wasn't as Arsenal-centric a pod as it normally is, but that's what the circumstances told me was the right thing to do. So, yeah, thank you all, as always, and I will see you on the next pod. We'll be back over the weekend at some point. I might not do one tomorrow if there's nothing to talk about. I've got to be honest with you guys. I'm in the process of doing some works, and I really do need to get on with it. And so if there's nothing to talk about, I might leave it for tomorrow. If there is a bit of news, of course, we'll cover it. But if I don't speak to you guys on Saturday, we'll definitely be back on Sunday. And until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great weekend, and maybe enjoy another sport. Bit of boxing this weekend. There's a good fight on, they tell me. Anyway, I'll see you all on the next one. Take care. Goodbye.